Good afternoon and welcome to Penguin Coast at the Maryland Zoo in Baltimore. I'm Daisha and I'm here on the same side of our exhibit as you are. If you have questions, you're welcome to come and talk to me. On the other side of our exhibit, out there with our penguins are our keepers, and they are responsible for the day-to-day care of our animals. You might think of snow and ice when you think of penguins, but African penguins actually have a climate that's very similar to that we have right here in Maryland. You can see that we have 3 keepers out in the exhibit. One keeper is by the buckets and is hand feeding each penguin. Another keeper is sitting right next to them with a clipboard. They are tracking what each individual bird eats. And that's part of how we have learned to care for our African penguins. African penguins first came to the Maryland Zoo in the 1960s. And since that time, over decades of research, we have found that hand feeding each bird helps us to track that individual bird's overall health. The data that's being collected right now will go back into a larger set of data that they can use to see and track a penguin's eating habits over time. Often with our African penguins, they might choose to eat a little bit more right before they drop their feathers. The scientific word for dropping their feathers is called a molt. So when they drop their feathers, they will often need to eat a whole lot right before they do that. They also might eat extra right before they lay an egg. You all are in great luck today because this is the first weekend in 2024 when all 5 chicks from the 2024 season are out in the main pool with the adult penguins. You might think, how can you tell the adults from the chicks? Because they're all the same size. Well, the adult penguins have that characteristic white stripe that follows the side of their head all the way down to their neck. The juvenile penguins, or our 2024 hatchlings, have a gray head. So their entire head is covered in gray feathers, and they're missing that white stripe on the side. So there's all 5 of them are out today. That's Chessie, Ripken, Crabcake, Duckpin, and Peabody. You might also ask, what kind of fish are our penguins eating? Well, penguins eat small schooling fish. In their native habitats of South Africa and Namibia, they'll mostly eat sardines and anchovies. Here in Maryland, a more sustainable schooling fish for them to eat is herring and capelin. They might also get smelt, which is a very small schooling fish. Penguins, like most birds, do not have teeth. So rather than chewing their food, they're going to swallow each fish whole. The feathers of our African penguin are very important to our birds. They have about 70 feathers per square inch. That's 70 feathers per square inch. That dense feather coverage allows them to maintain their body temperature as they swim in cold water or dive down into the cold water of their native habitat to catch fish at deeper depths. Their feathers are maintained with the ability to repel water because of an oil gland in their tail. So as you're looking at our penguins, you might see them preening or using their beak to cover their feathers. And that's part of how they get the oil from their tail on their feathers and part of how their feathers keep them dry as they swim through the water. As I mentioned before, this year's 2024 hatchlings have that gray feathers on their face. When they they reach about 18 months old, or about a year and a half, they're going to go through their first molt. And again, a molt is when the penguins drop all of their feathers. While most birds will drop just a few feathers at a time, penguins are going to drop all of their feathers all at one time. And you might think, why would they do that? Well, their feathers are so important for how they swim and how they're able to go out into deeper depths to get the fish that they need to eat. So having all of their feathers intact is really important. If they have a hole, if they're missing a few here and there, they're not going to be able to swim as well. They're going to get too cold. Yes, absolutely. I had a great question that they said if their feathers make them warm. Yeah, the African penguin's feathers are going to keep them nice and warm in cool weather. And they have this wonderful little patch right above their eye. It is pink, and that's part of how they release heat in the summertime. The feathers also have unique colors. So on their back, it's really dark, and on their belly, they've got some lighter colors, the whiter colors. And that's going to help to protect them as they're swimming in the water. So I had a question about how long they stay with their mother and whether or not they'd be scared if they left their mother. So our African penguins stay with their mom and dad for about 3 weeks after they hatch. At that time, the penguins can regulate their own body temperature, and our keepers will pull them into a juvenile creche. Out in the wild, penguins would leave their nest at about the same time and go into a group of younger penguins, and their parents would go out to sea to get fish, come back and feed them while they're in the group. So our African penguins get to be full adult height very, very quickly. At about 3 to 4 months, they're going to reach their full adult height, but they're going to maintain their juvenile feathers until they get to be about a year and a half or 18 months. Oh, how do we know if they're a boy or a girl? Great question. Well, if you're looking out at our penguins, you might notice that on each of their wings, that each penguin has a wing with a little band with colors on it. Do you guys see those colorful bands? Well, the penguins with the bands on their left wing are our female penguins. The penguins with the band on the right wing are the male penguins. And those colorful colors actually lead to numbers. And that's how the keeper with the clipboard is writing down what each penguin is eating by using the colors on their band. Yeah, so we have 2 different species that we intend to have here in the penguin coast, and that is our African penguin and the great white pelican. At the moment, we have a wild seagull that is enjoying our exhibit, and that does happen. The seagull is really good at stealing the fish the keepers are trying to feed to our penguins, and while we work very hard for that not to happen, it will occasionally happen. African penguins are an endangered species. In the wild, in their native habitats, their populations have dropped over 90% in the past 100 years. In their native habitat, there is organizations that are working to conserve the coastal birds of South Africa. The particular organization that Marilyn Zee works with is SANCOB. SANCOB works with the native population in South Africa to help the African penguins and other coastal birds as they are threatened with loss of food and loss of habitat due to human encroachment. Each year, the Maryland Zoo sent some of our keepers to Sandcott to help with their chick bolstering program. Chicks abandoned in the wild due to a lack of food are brought into a special care facility where they are reared by handlers, and then once they reach the right age, they are re-released into the wild. The penguins here at the Maryland Zoo cannot be re-released into the wild, in large part because they are so far away from their native habitat. But we do work with other zoos and aquariums along in North America to maintain a genetically diverse population. Participating in the Species Survival Plan, or SSP, allows us to maintain birds that have a genetic diversity and to share our best practices with other zoos and aquariums across North America. Oh, there's a great question. How long do African penguins live? Well, here at the zoo, we usually have a couple penguins that are over 30 years old. Wow. While the average lifespan is about 20 years, here at the Maryland Zoo, we do have some that are older. In the wild, the lifespan will be about 7 to 10 years. Total penguins at the Maryland Zoo, we have a colony of just over 100 penguins. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, in part because we are sharing our birds with others accredited zoos and aquariums across North America. Sometimes some of the penguins here will go to those zoos, sometimes some of their zoos will come here back to the Maryland Zoo. We are the largest colony of African penguins in North America. So you might think, how can you help to promote conservation of endangered species? Well, part of how you can help them is by visiting the Maryland Zoo, supporting the conservation efforts of our keepers and our staff. Thank you so much for visiting us today. It really makes a big difference as we work to conserve and care for our endangered animals. Another way we can help is by the fish you choose to eat. Fish that have been harvested sustainably and responsibly are a great choice for you to make when you're thinking about fish for your kitchen table. Seafoodwatch.org, a website created by the Monterey Bay Aquarium, routinely monitors how sustainable which fish are caught sustainably and which are not. So going to seafoodwatch.org is a great way to figure out which fish are seasonally caught responsibly.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming to the penguin feeding session. If anyone has any other questions, I'm happy to take them. For those who are just joining us, this is the first week when all 5 of the 2024 African penguin hatchlings are out in the main pool with the adult penguins. So that is Chessie, Ripkin, Duckpin, Crabcake, and Peaback. If you go to our social media at Maryland Zoo on Instagram, you'll see pictures of each of those hatchlings from this year, as well as the last 3 joining the main pool just earlier this week. Also on our Instagram page is a wonderful video showing the hatching and the tadpole stage of our Panamanian golden frog. 5 or 6 chicks that hatch. In the building behind our keepers has a large nesting room where our birds will nest. Because we are a part of that SSP, our Species Survival Plan, and interested in maintaining genetic diversity of our penguins, we encourage penguins who will maintain that diversity to form that pair bond. Penguins have a very strong instinct to pair bond, and will bond Yes. Out in the exhibit with our penguin are our great white pelicans. Those are native to Africa, just like the African penguin. The great white pelicans are here. And while I tell them apart, one of them is named Wallace and the other one is named Gromit. Those pelicans and say, hey, why don't they fly away? Well, each of our pelicans has one wing where the flight feathers have been trimmed. And that means they can't get an even lift when they flap their wings. So one wing has all of its feathers, but the other one will not have all of its feathers. You might also ask, when do pelicans eat? Well, the pelicans eat just before the penguin feeding. So they're just a moment ago, and she might be looking for dessert, but it's not time for them to eat yet. Does anyone else have any other questions? I'm happy to take them. Yeah, so we have over 100 penguins living here at the Maryland Zoo. And since the 1960s, when we got our first African penguins, over 1,000 penguins have hatched right here in Maryland.
How long do they live? Yeah.
All right, so the average lifespan of the penguins here in captivity is about 20 years. But we do have some individuals that are over 30 years old. So if you're looking at our penguins and you find one that the feathers just don't look right, that penguin is probably dropping its feathers. That process that I mentioned earlier called molt. Yeah, and the special term that we use for a penguin's molt is called catastrophic. So a catastrophic molt means they're dropping all of their feathers all in one go. Would we put the feathers, the flight feathers, on our great white pelicans? Well, we want to keep them right here in the exhibit, and we really don't want to introduce a non-native species to the environment here in Maryland. Well, one thing I mentioned earlier is that their feathers, having the darker feathers on the back and the lighter feathers on their tummy, really helps to protect our penguins. If you're looking down into the water, it's harder to find the penguins when their back is pointing up. That darker back pointing up with the lighter belly pointing down is called countershading. It's a special scientific term, and it applies to a lot of our marine mammals like dolphins and orcas, and a lot of our whales as well. They have the darker shade on the back and the lighter shade on their belly. And when you're looking down from above into the water, it's harder to find them. But if you're underneath them in the water and looking up and seeing the white belly, that's going to be white right up against the white sky above. harder to find when you're looking up. So that counter shading really helps to protect our penguins in the wild. Also ask about our pool. Oh, I don't know how many feathers are on the total penguin, but each inch of penguin skin has about 70 feathers. 70 feathers per square inch. You might also ask, how much fish do they eat in a day? Well, our African penguins eat about 1 pound of fish each day. Oi, I should know this question. How much does a penguin weigh? I think it's between 5 and 8 pounds. I think. 5 to 8? Oh, great. What about the pelicans? 9 to 7? Okay. Yeah. Okay. We'll go with that. Okay.
They're much fluffier than you think. They're not as heavy as they look.
Yeah, so part of why the penguins are so much heavier in the smaller body and the pelicans are so much lighter in the larger body is due to the density of their bones. That means how heavy is each individual bone. Well, the penguins, their bones are extra heavy because those bones being heavy helps the penguin to dive deep down into the water. If their bones were really light and hollow, the air would keep them from diving down deep. So having the denser, heavier bones in that smaller body is really an adaptive advantage for our penguins. Contrary, the pelicans have very hollow light bones, and those hollow light bones help them to fly in the air. Having the extra air in the lighter bones helps the pelicans to fly high in the air. So that's kind of why they have a similar